Welcome to ParenTween Connection Talks, where we bring you insight from the experts who can help you navigate life with teens and tweens. I'm Clarissa Constantine, founder of the ParenTween Connection. I've worked with teens and their families for more than 2 decades, and I've come to believe that the more supported and knowledgeable parents and the other members of the proverbial village feel, the better they can connect with and advocate for their teens and tweens. And ultimately, that means we'll lose fewer kids to suicide. So ParenTween Connection talks about anything and everything teen and tween related. And we invite you to continue these conversations with us in the ParenTween Connection group on Facebook. So listen in, learn, and no matter what, keep connecting. Today's guest is Renee Sinning, teen life coach and ParenTween Connection Trusted Expert. As a mom of 3, a retired high school teacher of 18 years, and a certified professional coach who also holds a Master of Education, Renee knows all too well the challenges of raising teenagers. It's a different world than when we were kids. Renee says that when she was in the classroom, she always felt that she wasn't just her kids' math teacher, but also their life teacher. Today, Renee partners with parents to help teens improve self-esteem, confidence, leadership, and resiliency through a teen coaching format. In short, Renee helps teens and their parents thrive, not just survive. During our conversation, Renee and I talked about a variety of factors that influence teens' self-esteem, and also some ways that parents and life coaches like herself can better support them. Renee Sinning, it is so awesome to have you here as one of the founding members of our Trusted Expert Network.
Hey, Clarissa, I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I know you and I could talk all day about the things that we as adults can do to help the kids in our world increase their self-esteem. And you've actually created an entire coaching program based on what you name the ABCs of teen self-confidence. And I suppose it's not just teen self-confidence, it's everybody's self-confidence, but you support teens specifically.
Right. Exactly right. Yeah. The ABCs, they actually work for everybody, adults and kids. The program is geared towards teens and parents, but the crux of it is geared towards teenagers and improving their self-confidence.
Absolutely. All right. So let's start. Can you define what are the A, B, and C themselves?
Yeah. So first I want to, before I do that, I want to say that, a lot of parents come to me because they want their kids to be confident, which makes sense. That's what we want as parents. But there's so much more to that. And it's a process, I believe, in order to get to that point. So in order to have self-confidence, you've got to have self-belief, because confidence is rooted in fear. So for kids to be confident, they have to have some belief and trust in themselves. And for kids to believe and trust themselves, they've got to have some sense of self-awareness. Who am I? What's important to me? How am I showing up in the world? So those are the ABCs. We start with self-awareness, then that feeds into self-belief. And then once we have those 2 pieces in place, then we can tap into self-confidence and really empower them with those tools and strategies.
Awesome. All right. So we start with the self-awareness. That's our A. Then we go to self-belief, which is the B, and then self-confidence, which is the C. And I can see that own development in myself, but it took me well into my 30s, probably into my 40s to find some of that. So, all right. So let's start with the A. What does self-awareness mean? And then what can parents or the other adults in our world do to help kids establish some level of that self-awareness?
So self-awareness, as far as teens go, is really recognizing who they are. It's not taught in the schools, and a lot of times teens adopt other kids' values and strengths, and they think that they're their own, and they are not. So it's really about empowering kids, like, what's important to you when you take out the outside world? What's important to you in your core? What are you good at? And a strength is not only things they're good at, it could be things that energize them. A lot of times people think our strengths are things like sports or dance or singing or something that you're really good at. And it's true, but we have a lot of other strengths, and those can just be things that we're maybe not so good at, but they energize us, right? And then our core values are the things that are really important to us. Is it trustworthiness? Is it academics? Is it adventuresome? Whatever that may be, because a lot of kids adopt the core values of their peers just to fit in, and they lose themselves in that process.
So
So
I'm gonna interject with a thought here, based on my own experience, but also something that I know that you and I have seen in the families that we've worked with over the decades that we've worked with these age ranges. I would propose that not only do kids adopt the interests, values, ideas like you're mentioning of their peers, but that in an effort not to disappoint their parents, they take on some of what their parents value that isn't
yes,
necessarily their own. And so I
right.
think it's worth mentioning that this isn't just about the peer influence. I think
No,
sometimes, we hear moms say, like, why won't my kid listen to me? Or like, wow, I've told my kid that 100 times, but here you come in, Coach Renee, and you say it once, and like, wow, they listen to
right.
you. But we don't think about the impact, we don't necessarily recognize the impact that we're actually having. And I mentioned that because I remember very clearly reading a book in my 20s called Quarter Life Crisis, which, we all know about the midlife crisis, divorce, go get the hot car or the hot new partner or
Yeah,
whatever the case is. But like the quarter life crisis comes in those early to mid 20s when it's like our kids have done everything that we've guided them to do in many cases. And they
yes,
get out, they get the degree, they get a job, and they kind of sit back and go like, well, now what? And I think the
right.
reason that can happen is they don't have this self-awareness you mentioned.
They don't. And yeah, and the core value piece, that is a pitfall. So a pitfall of the kids' core values is not only adopting the core values of others, peers and parents, just like you said, but it's also pushing away those values because there's someone else's. And so it's kind of, those are two little traps kids fall into, and they really can lose their sense of self in a big way if they're not actually ever even given an opportunity to look, bless you, to look inside and see who they are and what's important to me. And I always tell them, like, take the whole outside world out of it. It's just you. What's important to you? And it's a really cool exercise. And then when you find out, and then they find out that, hey, most of the people in my life are not feeding these core values. It also helps to explain a lot of conflict in their life. A lot of kids don't know why they're angry or mad or sad. And oftentimes that comes down to that internal conflict with their own core values that they don't even know exist. So when we begin with that self-awareness, that's that module 1 in my program, it really is helping them to get to know themselves. And it's really tied to friendships, especially during the high school and middle school years. There's a
Right.
lot of that internal strife and they don't know why. But when
Right.
they start to learn who they are, then we can start to empower them to kind of step into that and recognize how awesome that is, that they have this about them, because kids really aren't taught that.
Right. And I want to reference the point that you made about strengths as well, that it's not just things that you like or that you're good at, but it's also things that energize you. I was having a conversation with a mom just last week. She was talking about her, I think, rising junior, who is has some ADD, ADHD challenges and is a phenomenal athlete, but has decided he doesn't want to keep playing lacrosse. And the words that the mom shared with me were, but why don't you want to keep doing it? You're good at it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us think that just because you're good at it, that means that you should like it as well.
Right. Right.
And perhaps there's something that maybe this young man didn't recognize, that there was some value that was being um violated. That's not the right word, but like in
Yeah.
conflict. There was an
Right.
experience he was having on the lacrosse team or on the lacrosse field that was in conflict with one of his values. Or you know what? Maybe he just doesn't like the game.
Right. Right. Right.
So,
Yeah, it could be any of those things. It could be that he thinks this is what he's supposed to do. This
mhm,
is the journey he was supposed to take. And now he's kind of growing up a little bit. He's a rising junior and kind of thinking, maybe maybe this isn't for me. Maybe this
right,
isn't what I want to do. And it
right,
takes confidence to do that, right?
right.
To
And
like, yeah,
I did actually say to the mom, as frustrating as that may be, because you see possibility there, like kudos to him for
right,
knowing that and being able to go, no, this isn't where I want to spend my time. And maybe there's more to it than he just doesn't
right,
like it, but maybe
right.
he just doesn't like it. And that's
Yes,
okay too. So, okay.
right.
So you said awareness has to
Yep,
exist before belief.
right.
What's
Right.
belief?
So self-belief. So that's kind of like trusting yourself. feeling empowered in the thought, the decisions, and the choices you make. So that self-belief piece, a lot of that, at least in the program that I run, is tied to choices and to our thought process. Because I always tell teenagers there's a lot of things out of their control, but the one thing that they have 100% control over is their mindset and their thoughts. And so people will try to influence their thoughts. It's a tough world out there as teenagers. People are going to try to put them down, and there's comparison culture everywhere, but they don't have to absorb it, and they don't have to believe it. There is choice there, but kids don't know that, and they need to be taught how to take their thoughts, the thing they have control over, and use it to their advantage. It's almost like a slingshot. If someone says, "Ooh, I don't like your left ear," and then all of a sudden it ruins your whole day, right? Now for a kid, that might be their tennis shoes, but it ruins their whole day because they absorb that and think, "Oh my God, what's wrong with my left ear?" Right? When really it has nothing to do with them. It has everything to do with the other person. And that's what I always try to teach them when we're doing this mindset piece, is when people say things to you, it's more about them than it is about you. But until teens are taught that, they think it's about them. "Oh my God, what's wrong with me? Oh, my hair looks terrible. Oh my gosh, I just saved up and bought these amazing tennis shoes. They're sneakerheads. They spend hundreds of dollars, and then they go to school and wear them. And someone says, 'Those are so ugly. I can't believe you spend money on them.' And then they never wear them again, or they start questioning themselves." So that self-belief piece is being able to kind of step into your own power, beginning with your mind and saying, just because someone says something doesn't mean that I have to believe it. And what do I want to believe? What am I choosing to believe? And I teach them about the 5 choices that we have in every situation, which I'm not going to go into here, but 4 of them work for you and 1 of them works against you. A lot of kids get stuck in that one, which is more like that victimhood thinking, but there's 4 other choices in our thoughts, but they're not taught that. And so a lot of times they don't believe in themselves. They believe what everyone else says about them, what society, parents, teachers, friends, peers, everything, instead of believing in themselves. So when you have that awareness piece first, now they know a little bit more about their true self, right? The essence of who they are. So then we can pull that into helping them to start bolstering up that belief, along with teaching them those mindset tools and teaching them choices. You do have choices in situations, and you don't have to believe. And it's just huge when they start to actually believing that they can do something because they want to, or I don't have to listen to what someone says. Not all parents say the right things. I teach a class through the courts, and some of those kids, some of the things they tell me that their parents say to them are not very nice. But then say, but that's about them and not about you. And so even though you're the kid, no one controls this piece but you, your thoughts. That's the 100% power the kids have. It's their power or it's to their detriment, right? They've got to be taught the tools to use that so they can make choices to bolster their own self-belief, because it's the thoughts that what ruins that belief is the stories they're telling themselves. You're right. I'm not good enough. I'm dumb. I'm not smart. I can't go to college. I'm going to end up like my great uncle Peter, that's like terrible person, right? It's the stories they're telling themselves that they believe to be true. And if you give them just a little bit of hope and just a teeny bit of a way of looking at that, can make all the difference in the world, because it's all energy. Our thoughts are in our words. It's all energy.
Well, and I remember taking a coaching class myself, 15 years ago, where we had the TFAR acronym, that the thoughts lead to your feelings. Your feelings lead to your actions, and your actions lead to your results. But then the results, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, where the results then reaffirm the thoughts that we originally have. I have this conversation a ton, largely with young women who think they're bad at math. I think I'm bad at math, therefore I feel intimidated when I look at a math question on either a test in school, or like for me as an SAT, ACT coach, I see it a lot there. And then that feeling impacts my ability to act in an efficient fashion on a math question. I get super confused and I don't do the math correctly, which results in a lesser score, which only reaffirms the thought that I suck at math. And so, I like to use the ideas of like, what if you aren't bad at math, but maybe you just had teachers who weren't very good at teaching it. Or once we go, okay, that is that, what if that is true? That could be true. Then I like to say, well, is it possible that we could change this thought? Because
Right,
sometimes it's really hard to go from I suck at math to I'm a math superstar because the evidence doesn't support that yet.
right. Yeah,
But
yeah.
going, but wait, can I find a little inkling of possibility? So I'm always like, is it possible that we could
Yes.
break down some of the challenges with fractions or whatever the case may be,
Yeah.
insert challenge here, right?
Yes.
Which is exactly what you're saying, that like if we can even have a possibility of changing the thought, then
Right.
we can change the feelings, the actions, and then get different results, which can reaffirm like a bigger door opening, as it were, on that possibility.
Yeah. There's so much to thoughts too. And it's also like I read something recently about, our thoughts, you can't stop your thoughts from coming. They just come at you like they're like characters on a stage.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's like, which ones are you going to spotlight?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because they come in, but which ones do you want to spotlight? And the other piece of that TFAR, which I actually use too, but I take that thought piece and it's maybe can't control the thought, but you can control the message that you're attaching to the thought. So between the T and the F, there's a little message piece there. So this is my thought. What's the message there? And then you dig, is that message true? So it's kind of
Right.
all like, is that based in fact? Is there
Right.
where's the proof that maybe it's not true? Maybe there's
Right.
another way of looking. So that it's the message attached to the thought that is
Mm-hmm.
really huge. If we can just shift the message, thought might still be there, right? But if we can shift that message, then the thought holds less power. So it's
Absolutely.
all about that mindset. So that B piece, the self belief, is that my in my program is the big mindset piece. There's a lot that goes into that middle part once we have
Mm-hmm.
the awareness, and then we start like shifting. We have the kids get curious. It's about curiosity, really like, huh, really? Is this really true? And when you bring curiosity into your thoughts and your feelings and everything that's going on around you, then like possibilities start to open up. Other
Right.
solutions might appear.
And Renee, it strikes me that we're having this conversation as two grown women talking about the concepts that we want the younger generation to incorporate and to learn. But golly, we could be talking to ourselves and to
Yeah.
our friends and family.
Yeah.
If we don't have the awareness of ourselves as women, as men, as non-binary, as moms, dads, uncles, aunts, whatever the case is, if we don't have an awareness of what's important to us and where some of this conflict is coming from, it makes it that much more difficult to stand in our own belief about the decisions that we make, the
Right.
things that we let the kids in ourselves do, or the kids in our worlds do. Whether we let them go to band or whether we let them go to
Right.
that party or whatever it is. And so
Yeah.
that awareness leads to the belief. That makes a ton of
Yeah.
sense to me. So then how does that, in your version of the world and in your paradigm and in your programming and your coaching, how does that then lead into the self-confidence?
So the confidence, we've got awareness, we now kind of starting to believe in ourselves, maybe not 100% there, but we've some tools now. And then so now confidence is about doing something and not being so attached to the outcome or worrying about what other people think. So kids are not confident. Kids who are not confident, that is often and almost always rooted in fear. I'm afraid what people will think. I'm afraid of failing. I'm afraid of making a mistake. There's so much fear because if you're confident, you just go out and try things and you don't really worry about the outcome because you generally we don't control most outcomes. But if you're confident enough, you'll at least try it, right? Maybe you want to try out for the swim team. You don't know if you're going to make it. So I'm going to try out anyhow and just see, right? That's a confident person would do that. And maybe I'll make it, maybe I won't. But someone who's not confident is like, oh my gosh, that'd be so embarrassing if I don't make it. Or going for a position in a club, or even studying for a test. And so there's so much fear wrapped into a lack of confidence that it's hard to tap into that without that belief
Mm-hmm.
and that awareness. So once we've got those pieces in place, then we tap into the fear. You may have heard the acronym face everything and rise, or I forget the other. I'm just forget. I'm drawing a blank on the other piece of it, but that's fear. So fear is. So then we just go through different kinds of things. So what, like a bunch of different like exercises and a lot of them are, and I think one of them I actually have called is kind of like a what if, and you just go through like, or the 5 what. So what if this happens and what if that happens, and kids get to realize if you can handle the worst case scenario, then that boosts their confidence. And generally the answer is yes. You know, you go through this, and what if that happens? And then what? And then what? And then what if that happens? And then what? And then will you be okay, or are you not going to be okay? I'd be okay. I'd get over it. Right. Right. And so we start to build up and kind of chop away at the fear. And then there's some other things, but it's about recognizing that I can handle those things I'm afraid of, because I believe in myself enough and I trust myself and I know myself. So now maybe I will try out for that team. Maybe I will study for the test and I won't get an A, but maybe I'll get a C, and that will be okay. And it's
Right.
okay. Maybe I will make a mistake, but that doesn't mean everyone's laughing at me. So you start to alleviate some of those fears and help them to realize that most of the things they're afraid of are in their mind. Like most people aren't paying attention anyhow. And
Right.
so, but they still need that confidence to try. So it really is a process. There's no quick, we can list 5 things to help kids be more confident. We can give that, but it doesn't just happen. I believe it really does start from the inside out, and it
Mhm.
takes time to build that. Some kids, it seems like, are naturally, like my youngest daughter, I think she was born confident, right? But my son, no. And it's taking, he still struggles with it. He's getting there. He's 23 and has other challenges, but his confidence was not innate. And most kids is not,
Not,
but
yeah.
we can teach it to them. But we've
Right.
got to build up their in who they are and get them believing in themselves and liking themselves and accepting themselves.
Mhm.
Really, like accepting themselves, and doesn't matter what other people think, because I'm going to
Right.
try anyhow, because it's something I want to do.
Right. You just made me think of a conversation I had with a young woman that I worked with probably 5 years ago. She was a twin and was in the college admissions process and had, rolled with peers who were going to some, planning to apply to some pretty rigorous colleges. And, she was
Mm-hmm.
a really, top-notch student herself. And she was just stressing over whatever the SAT or ACT, whatever it was we were working
Yeah.
on. And she just couldn't break this barrier of a goal score that she wanted. And she'd learned all the things.
Yeah.
And she just couldn't, like, she was getting such performance anxiety that
Yeah.
she couldn't break the score barrier. And so we sat down and had a conversation. And I mean, it was ultimately several conversations in a row, but we did exactly what you just mentioned. And so I'm like, wow, good. Renee said to do it. This is validating for me. But I was like, okay, what's the worst case? What's the worst case? What if, what if, what if, what if, what
Right.
if? And really, what it boiled down to, in essence, is that she had this fear that turned out to be a paralyzing fear that all of her friends were going to go off to college, not just like, esteemed colleges, but they were going to go to
Right.
college. And she
Right.
was basically going to be stuck in her parents' basement for eternity.
Yes.
And I mean, that's a valid fear for kids, like not performing,
Yeah.
disappointing their parents. I don't think parents recognize how desperately kids don't want to disappoint their parents normally.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
she was so hung up, and I don't even think she realized it, on the fact that she was so afraid that she wasn't going to go to college and she was just going to be an
Yeah.
utter and complete failure in life. And
Yeah.
it all boiled down to she had to do, well, she saw it that she had to do better on this test. And part of it was, like you said, okay, could you deal with the worst case scenario? For her, she's like, no, I can't live in my parents' basement for the rest of my life. Like, I
Right.
can't be okay with that. And
Yeah.
so the alternative was, okay, how likely is it that that is really going to happen? Like,
Right.
maybe you decide that Stanford isn't right for you. But that again comes back to the awareness, I think, that you're talking
Yes.
about. Like,
Yeah.
is Stanford even the right fit for you? Are you going to be
Right.
happy there? Or would you be way more comfortable at going to community college for a couple of years, or going to a
Yeah.
less competitive environment? But golly, if our kids
Mm-hmm.
don't have that awareness, we're setting them
Yes.
up for a whole lot of challenge, aren't we?
Yeah. Because at some point in their life, it's going to come up. So the sooner
Absolutely.
we can teach this stuff to kids, the better. We're arming them with so much. And this is stuff they can take with them forever. They might forget it,
Absolutely.
it might disappear for a while, but it's in there. The
Mhm.
seed has been planted,
Well, and
right?
I think the other thing that I've seen a lot is I really want to encourage the folks who are listening to this, presumably the adults, is that it's really challenging. So many adults. I just had this conversation with a mom today have their own stuff that comes up relative to their kids' success and their kids' performance. And,
Mm-hmm.
if my kid isn't successful, what does that mean about me? All of
Right.
these things.
Right.
And so that actually is something that I just invite you to consider. If your kids' goals aren't yours or their awarenesses don't match yours, it's an invitation to be okay with that, because
Right.
the sooner you can be okay with it, the less strife there's going to be with the kids.
Yeah. And the better connection you're going to have, and they're going to feel respected and accepted and valued and all of that stuff. And a lot of time, if kids don't feel that way, or they feel like they're disappointing their parents all the time, then when things get hard for them, they don't go to their parents. Right. And ultimately, that's the best relationship, when the parent is their safe space.
Mhm.
But so many kids feel judged and not listened to and not understood.
Yep.
And they feel these expectations. And a lot of times I think parents don't even mean, they may just want better for your kid, but it's their journey and not ours. So sometimes as parents, I think we have to remember that our job is to guide them and to give them the tools, but they're going to figure out their path. And we do have to be like, I have 3 kids. So Megan and Kelly's in college, Megan graduated, Nick will never go to college. Right. I taught high school. He barely passed high school. And that wasn't a reflection on me. I could have made it that way, but school was
Right.
hard for him. He has Asperger's, ADHD. He barely got through, like, not even joking. And so, and I was a teacher. And so, but I couldn't attach that to me because we had guided him. We'd given him all the tools that he had, and we point him, and he's on his journey, and his journey doesn't include college. And I don't think it ever will. And that's okay. That
Well,
doesn't reflect on us.
and that speaks to that gap between the thought and the feeling, right? You have the
Yes.
thought of, my kid is never going to go to college. What's the meaning that you put
Yes.
behind that
Right.
influences the feeling? So that's a place where, as the adults, we can arrest that process too. So, all
Yeah.
right, cool.
Yeah.
So I always wrap up our podcast interviews by asking our guests which of our foundations of connection resonate the most. And I totally didn't give you any warning on this, so
You
my
didn't, and I
apologies.
don't have them memorized, Clarissa.
That's okay, because you know what? Our listeners don't either. So let me share them, and then you can tell
Okay.
me which one you like most. So, the
Okay.
foundations of
Very good.
connection, these are the foundations that I believe are the reason that a lot of kids will come and talk to somebody like you or me, Renee, when they don't feel comfortable talking to their parents. And they're the basis of our connection calls in ParenTween University. So it's create a safe place, observe, non judgment, nod and smile, as in like zip it,
Yeah. Yeah.
explore, challenge your truths or get curious, take your time, innovate, own your own story, or nurture.
So they're all good, obviously. I think one of the key ones for connection is non-judgment.
Tell me
Because
more.
when teenagers feel judged by their parents, that's sending a message to them that you're not good enough. I'm judging your decisions, whether it's something they said, whether it's a choice they did, whether it's a grade. When kids feel judged, they will shut down and they will not share. Because if they feel that's coming, they feel misunderstood, unheard, all of that stuff. And so I think judgment, we've got to take that out of parenting and instead ask questions. What's really going on? Right. And because if they're not open, if they feel like when they come to you and say, oh my gosh, I'm like, I failed my test, and you're going to be like, well, you didn't study, right? Did you study? How long did you study? Right now, that's judgmental. You're going right in that with judgment, and may not mean to, and it might be true, right? They were on their phone, they didn't study, but still, words matter, and energy matters, and the message that they're getting matters. And if the message they're getting is that I'm being judged, they are not going to share. And then the big stuff happens, and they're going to social media and friends to get their answers, and that's not what we want. So I really think like non-judgment is so huge in building connection with your teen, because
Awesome.
no one wants to be judged. Even we don't, right? I
No,
mean, I don't care
absolutely.
so much anymore because I'm older, and I've done the work. Clarissa, I've done the work. But
Absolutely.
no one likes to be judged, and but teenagers don't know how to put that aside. And so,
Right.
and especially, and they want, and that goes with safe space,
Mhm.
right? If they
Well,
feel judged, then you're not the safe space.
exactly. And it also goes with getting curious.
All
and,
of it. That's the
asking questions.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, it's all tied
Awesome.
together, but I think that one's huge.
Awesome. All right. We are going to wrap it up today. For anybody who is part of ParenTween University, Renee and I are going to continue our conversation. We're going to be talking more about some specific tools that you can implement at home that relate to the awareness, the belief, and the confidence. But for now, I'm going to say thank you, Renee, for joining us. And we will see you in our Facebook group as one of our trusted experts. We're glad to have you there.
Thanks, Clarissa. Thanks for having me.
And that's a wrap on today's episode of ParenTween Connection Talks. Be sure to check out the show notes for any links that we mentioned during our conversation. If you'd like a copy of the Foundations of Connection, you can find it right on our homepage at www.parenttweenconnection.com. And if you'd like to feel more supported as a parent and have a closer, healthier relationship with the teen or tween in your life, we invite you to join the ParenTween Village. It's a judgment-free zone for the members of that village that it takes to raise a child. For just $19.99 a month or $199 a year, you'll join a community of parents and other supporters of teens and tweens who are dedicated to having the best relationships they can with the kids they love. You'll hear upcoming episodes live streamed into the group as we record them, along with exclusive bonus trainings from many of our podcast guests. You'll also be able to join our monthly group connection calls and other workshops just for members of the ParenTween Village. You can join today at www.parenttweenconnection.com. And until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and keep connecting.